Well, everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for attending this VMworld 2018 session, Is VDI Dead? Before we begin, there's the disclaimer. I didn't read this. I don't expect you to. Let me give you the gist. If you buy or sell stock based on what this guy says, that's on you. That's the gist. So my VMworld session, is VDI dead? No. Thank you. Almost forgot. Don't forget your survey. So I thought it'd be fun, though, if we did some like Twitter. So is VDI dead? No. So I've got no and yes, right? So everyone who wants the cameras out right now for like, is VDI dead? No. I'll kind of stand here, and you can say like, Brian says, VDI is not dead. Okay, and now for yes. Feel free to tweet exactly what you want. I got it either way. So is VDI dead? By the way, I guess is a by means of introduction, I've been sort of involved with 10 books, either writing or co-writing or editing or publishing. I had a website, brianmadden.com, for like 15 years. In 2016, I tweeted, after 21 years, I'm leaving the IT industry, and brianmadden.com. Gabe Knuth and Jack Madden will continue. A lot of you asked what I've done in the past, couple years. After I left brianmadden.com, I bought a camper van, drove around a little bit. I stopped shaving. That was pretty fun. And then earlier this year, I tweeted, after some much-needed rest and relaxation, I'm officially back in EUC full-time, having just accepted a job at VMware, working in the EUC CTO's office with Sean Bass and team. So excited, details here. You'll notice, by the way, that's published on April 2nd. My first day was actually April 1st, but I think no one would believe that if I wrote that. My coworkers, specifically in product marketing, really wanted me to make it clear that I work at VMware. So I work at VMware, just so you all are aware. While we're on that topic, I don't work at brianmadden.com. That's Jack Madden. The name is right there. So Jack Madden, not Jack Madden. To be very clear, Jack Madden writes brianmadden.com. Brian Madden works at VMware. All right, we're set. So is VDI dead? Well, it's funny because if you Google it, it looks like it's a good topic, that people write about. I feel like before we can really talk about whether VDI is dead, we sort of have to define VDI. And for the purposes of this conversation, we can define VDI as single-user virtual machines, that are remoting the Windows user interface running on-prem. That's kind of what most of us think of with VDI. I would say, RDSH, multiple users per VM, also running on-prem. Let's just call this all kind of, remoting Windows for the purposes of the conversation today. I've done sessions on, VDI versus RDSH. That's not the point of today. As we're talking about today, we could also say cloud-based VMs. So whether those are RDSH or VDI, running on Azure or AWS or Google or whatever that may be. You could say maybe traditional DAS also is another way of doing it, similar to cloud-based, but you're not running the infrastructure yourself. You're just paying for desktops per month. Again, that can be VDI or RDSH. I guess if I'm making a list, I have to include Windows 10 multi-user, if that's a thing. This has been talked about in the past couple weeks on the tubes about how there's, Microsoft will come out with a version of Windows 10 that allows multiple users to connect. So it's like RDSH, but based on Windows 10, not based on Windows Server. And at first, you're like, oh man, that's badass. That's awesome. And then you're like, but what problem is that actually solving really? Because it's like I get the incompatibility of terminal server with the scalability of Windows 10. I'm not sure what the use case is, but anyway, that's in the latest builds. But these all have one thing in common, or a few commonalities, which is they're all about Windows desktops and Windows apps that are running somewhere else with the UI remoted to the user. So for the purposes of today's conversation, we're talking about this, like the concept of remoting Windows apps from somewhere else to a user. Is that going to be a thing in the future, or is that kind of like a Band-Aid technology for the past that's going to be dead? And all this stuff, I mean, it has a very checkered past. You know, I wrote, along with my coworkers Gabe Knuth and Jack Madden, a book in 2012 called The VDI Delusion. I want to very much point out this was 6 years ago. But you know, I was not an easily converted fan of VDI. I like the RDSH-based technology. I thought VDI was a more expensive and less performing way to do RDSH. So that was, you know, that was kind of back in the day. And, you know, in those days, I've used these slides so many times, but I love it. You know, I talked about how your desktop was a transformer and VDI was a GoBot. I don't know if anyone had GoBots. If you never heard of GoBots, you're caught up. So that's 6 years ago. So where is VDI in 2018? I mean, it's come a long way. You know, the technology that creates VDI, it's fine. Seems good. Protocols are fine. You know, now we can do persistent or non-persistent. In the early days, we always had to do non-persistent to make the finances work. Now it's okay. Costs nowadays are fine. So VDI, I'm going to say 2018, not the worst. So, you know, that's about as a ringing of an endorsement as you're going to get from me. And I'm comfortable with that. VDI, not the worst. All right. So like, it's legit. I mean, I'd say that about 90% of enterprise IT technology. It's not the worst. So, but of course, you know, there's still limitations to VDI, even in 2018. I mean, peripherals are still an issue. And it's kind of funny because, you know, I used to talk about how, you know, there's that old triangle, like fast, cheap, and easy. Like pick two, right? If it's fast and cheap, it's not easy. If it's fast and easy, it's not cheap, that kind of thing. And we talked about with remoting protocols, you know, you've got like high CPU, high network, and user experience. You pick any two. And you know, as the technology has evolved, it's like, oh, we have USB, and now there's USB support in these remoting protocols. But now there's USB-C and USB 3, and all these things are multi-gigabits that are not going to work. And even you find out that USB, there's no one thing called USB. There's about 50,000 different commands you can use on USB. Every vendor and everything client combo supports some. Maybe those are the ones your app needs, but we don't really know. So peripherals, you know, that's possibly always going to be a challenge with the remoting Windows environments. There's still always an issue with graphics, and it's just a math. You know, we talk about GPUs on servers and network pipes and advanced protocols and clients that have decoding chips built in, but at the same time, we're adding more and more pixels into our desktops. So, you know, now we've got, you know, 10 years ago, we wanted 1024 by 768 resolution, and now we've got 3500 by 1900, you know, 32 bits, and so it's again, there's always sort of challenges with the remoting of that. Obviously, I still need a network connection in order to get the Windows environment remoted. And talk about 5G all you want. I had 0 network connection on my United Airlines flight from Newark coming here yesterday. Still paid for it, $28.99, thank you, which I will expense because I work at VMware. But you know, the network connection, of course, is still a thing. And you know, multimedia and like kind of AV is. This is always a challenge, right? And so I know this, like I said, you know, within Blast, we did, you know, sort of enhancements for Skype, and now everyone's using Teams, and now they want to use Jabber and Cisco and all this kind of stuff. So again, these are not showstoppers saying that VDI is garbage, but I'm just saying that VDI, yeah, it's fine. A lot of people are using it, but it's still not a magical technology that's suddenly, you know, ready for everyone. Now, so of course, the point of this conversation is, you know, is VDI dead? So to me, it's another way of saying that is that, you know, does VDI have a future? And in order to look at that future, I think the real questions are not, is VDI dead or does VDI have a future? Rather, it's one, will Windows apps still be a thing in this future, whatever it is we're talking about? And then two, if yes, will remoting their pixels down to the users be a valid method of delivery for that application to the users? So really, these are the two questions we're trying to solve. We're trying to answer as we explore, is VDI dead? And then, by the way, it's always moving targets. So the secret third question is, and if it's true today, and in 5 years, is it true in 10 and 15, and sort of down the future? So really, is VDI dead? I want to find out, are Windows apps going to keep on being a thing? And if so, is remoting those Windows apps to the user the way to deliver those applications? So I kind of want to dig into these two questions a little bit more. So first, will Windows apps still be a thing? It's funny because this conversation that we've been having for 10 years. You've probably all seen these slides before. This little thing here. The keyboard is dead. People are talking about. We're living in a post-PC world. The desktop is dead. Which all of these really are euphemisms for saying that Windows is dead, right? And we can show good data, like here's the Windows usage worldwide, and this is real data, and look at that. Of course, there's a problem with this. There's no labels on your axes. So you add labels and you find, oh, well, the top of the chart's 95% and the bottom is 90%. And it's over 4 years. Let's straighten this out and make it normal human style. All right. Man, you all better start looking for new jobs. And then, even if this isn't enough, the news from a month or two ago is actually, PCs sales are up. And yes, it's still 2018. This is from last month. So yeah, good job. Michael Dell tweeted about this back in the day. Since the post-PC era started, 3.6 billion PCs have been sold. Pretty good era. I bet more products wish for same. Now post-PC era. I love them. So we believe that Windows applications probably going to be around a little while. One of my other favorite slides I've been using for 20 years is when this happens. I don't know what's going to happen with humanity in the world, but I do know 3 things. Number 1, there will be cockroaches. Number 2, there will be Hostess Twinkies. Number 3, there will be applications powered by the Microsoft Windows operating system. Bink. Everyone likes to focus on, what zombie tools you're going to have, right? Like, what's your zombie knife, your go bag, you got your mountain bike and your gold and your guns and all this kind of stuff. What's going to happen? And you're taking survival classes and welding and small engine repair and this kind of stuff. Who knew that your MCSE is going to be the tool that saves us when the robotic overlords powered by the AI that we helped create take over the world? So we're in good shape. But this whole idea of looking at Windows applications. Look at this within your own environment. How many Windows apps do you have? I don't know, 100, 200, 500 Windows apps? Let's say you've got 400 Windows applications, which, by the way, it seems like a lot, but then you start doing the math, and you're like, well, that one there, that one, that group, that one, yeah. It's still in the 10 to 1. You got 1,000 users. I bet there's 100 Windows apps in your company somewhere. And only one person has to use it to make it important that you have to support it. You have 400 Windows apps. How are you getting off these things, right? Let's say you can migrate 1 app a month, which, by the way, is crazy. Because migrating off of a Windows application, it's not just like version 2 to version 3. You got to find all new applications. You have to go to other conferences about painting apps or whatever these things are now and look at requirements and how you're going to do the data migration and the plan. It's a big deal. But so I don't even think you can migrate off of a average 1 a month. But if you could, how long is that taking? That's 33 years. So is Windows dead? I think we're asking the wrong question. I think the question we're asking is not Windows dead. Windows is not going to be in here. This is the problem we got to deal with. Because we're going to be there a lot sooner than these Microsoft Windows applications are. I think Microsoft Windows will be just fine. Thank you. And let's face it. We've been hearing that Windows is dead for 20 years. Right? Literally, right? Well, 20 years ago, it was Java. It was Genie, it was .NET, it was web apps, Ajax, Cloud, Mobile Flex, Silverlight. Something's been killing Windows for literally 20 years, right? So everyone who is paying half attention to their Windows estate, at some point along the way they got a fire lit under their ass, and they're like, we got to start moving off of these Windows applications. And you probably did. You probably migrated some apps to Java. You migrated some apps to IE6, and then IE8, and then IE11. And you start writing these apps, and all that means, and these have been successful. I mean, now you're supporting those instead. Congrats. But what this means really, the easy apps have been migrated already, right? So any application that, because Windows had 20 years of dying, any application that was easy to move off Windows, we did that already. Which the corollary to that is that the remaining apps you have on Windows are the hard ones. These are the applications that have been written, continuous development since the early 80s, and the people who wrote them are dead, and the VM that runs them is Windows XP, although we just saw in the news you can now boot Windows 95 from GitHub or something like that and run that anywhere, so maybe you can make a container for Windows. But the Windows apps you have today, these are the difficult ones. So I think these Windows apps are going to be around for a very long time. The other sort of reality around these Windows applications is the landscape of devices is changing. So we talk about 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, all the applications were Windows apps. Then we had all these alternative technologies, these web apps and SaaS apps, and now you've got iOS native and Android apps and cloud applications. Well, those didn't necessarily replace Windows apps. Look at Office 365. There's a web version, an iOS version, an Android version, a Mac version, and a Windows version. So 4 new versions on top of your existing Windows version, so you're still supporting Windows Office in addition to all these other ones. So we can certainly say that the percentage of market share of Windows is going down. But just because Windows was 100% of the market, then 80%, then 60, then 40, that's more because the market is blowing up around it. It's not like we just take a ruler and draw a straight line down to 0, and in 3 years there's no more Windows apps, and we can go home and all become accountants or something. And clearly, I mean, VMware is doing this, Citrix is doing this. Everyone is, building products now that support all of the different, mobile and web and cloud and Windows and Mac and all that kind of thing. So my point is that Windows apps are going to continue to exist in some form for a very long time. So that was the first question we're trying to answer. Is will Windows apps still be a thing? And my answer to that is yes, Windows apps will still be a thing. So the second question is, okay, will remoting their pixels still be a thing? Right? Because that's what VDI is. We've got Windows apps. I'm not saying we're remoting all the Windows apps, but we're talking about, VDI is a technology that takes our Windows apps and remotes the pixels down. So even if 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we still have Windows apps, are we going to want to remote their pixels down? And the reason I say that is because this whole Windows 10, this modern management thing. This is a slide from Microsoft. The traditional management is, oh, hey, before we take the pictures here, let me just correct this. There we go. Now you may take photos. But the traditional, a lot of people went to VDI because managing Windows desktops and laptops was a huge pain in the ass. And we talked about this in the last session. There's a lot of reasons to do VDI. Some are more valid than others, and everyone has their own reason for doing it, and one customer might have different reasons than another customer, and that's all fine. But there's a lot of customers using VDI, especially now that the costs have come down in VDI, where they say, I'm responsible for all these Windows machines and images in my environment. It's just such a pain in the ass to try to have them online and patched and push out patches and get them to connect and update. And I'm trying to push out, I think Sean Massey in the last session said with SCCM, if they got 85% app deployment or patch deployment, they call that success. Kind of in the traditional, PC lifecycle management. This is not an SCCM problem. It's the same with, if you're using, Symantec or I don't know what else exists, Landesk, any of these radio, any of those types of things. It's tough. So I think a lot of people said, hey, VDI is actually an easier way to manage Windows, even if I'm fully persistent and giving the user the same environment, it's in my data center. So, if a user's working, give or take 40 hours a week, that means there's 128 hours remaining in that week that the user's not working, that I have access to their machine and I can reboot it and update software and do whatever I need to do. That's a lot easier if it's a VM either in my data center or the cloud or somewhere where I know where it is. So I think there's a lot of people that said, oh, we went to VDI because we just wanted to have a better way to manage our Windows PCs. And that's very valid. Now, there's this modern management thing that Microsoft is doing. And modern management, this is not a product per se. It's not an interface. It's not an API. It's just an umbrella term for a bucket set of technologies where people who are using mobile devices, you've got iOS and Android, think about how these things work. If you're managing iPhones, and I don't care if you use an AirWatch or Mobile Iron or Zen Mobile or Intune or Mass 360, whatever it is, you can apply a policy update or have a policy that changes based on geography or IP address. If that user's on an airplane and flies from New York to London, the second they land in London and turn their phone on, boom, it sees it connects to the management server, it's got the new policy applied, it's updated, it's locked out, it's whatever it has to reconfigured, whatever it is, it happens instantaneously. Now think about your Windows laptop, it doesn't work that way. If you don't connect back into the VPN and actually log back onto the domain, you're not getting new policies applied. Sure, you can push out packages and stuff with local package distribution points, but you're going back to a site server, your home server, an Active Directory, and if that user never logs on, they can use their laptop no problem and no policies get applied. And this is what I talk about, the reporting is slow, and this is why people say, well, if we get 85% of machines patched, we call that a success. So the world went to Microsoft and said, please give us a better way to manage Windows. iPhones are so easy to manage. Android devices are so easy to manage. Mac now is easy to manage. And so Microsoft said, OK, we're going to create a new set of APIs under this umbrella term called the modern management infrastructure. And we're going to let you manage Windows 10 devices the same way you manage iPhones. And you can set policies and apply configurations and patches and all that sort of thing. Now, there's some limitations in what Microsoft does. It's only Windows Store applications and MSIs, and you can't do group policy. VMware has solutions for that. That's not the point of today. But the point is that the modern management for Windows 10 makes it much easier to manage a Windows 10 device. So before, where it was very difficult, now it's easier. So there's a certain group of customers who've used VDI who are like, we're using VDI just to make Windows easier to manage for these laptops out in the world. If we have Windows 10 modern management, maybe we don't need to use VDI anymore. Because we can manage our actual laptops. We don't need to do VDI. And in fact, I did an article on this. It's on LinkedIn. When is this? From June. Have we reached peak VDI? This is what the question I asked. Have we reached peak VDI? Because I wondered, now that we have modern management for Windows 10, if people will start moving off of VDI and sort of going back. Now, the point of this, everything I talked about now is remoting pixels still going to be valid in the future? Right? We've determined that Windows applications are going to be around sometime. Is remoting pixels still going to be valid? And here I'm starting to say, no, not as valid. It's not as needed anymore, because if you were using VDI for management, it's easier to manage these machines. Now, of course, not everyone agrees with me. Lots of people still think that Windows app remoting, Windows remoting pixels is still going to be a thing. I mean, Microsoft clearly does. They've got RDS, they've got VDI, they're hosting things out of Azure. They just announced that Windows 10 multi-user thing I was talking about. So Microsoft still thinks that there is a market for remoting pixels. Nutanix just bought Frame for like 155 million or 165 million or something like that. I mean, what does Frame do? Like, all they have, this is not a full end user. Like, Frame's not managing iPhones and Androids and web apps. Frame is just delivering remote Windows applications. I mean, Nutanix thought for $155 million that there's going to be a market in the future of remoting pixels. AWS has their Workspaces product, which is a sort of a classic DaaS offering. It's only DaaS. AWS does not have a product that manages iPhones and physical Windows and Macs. It's just about remoting Windows applications. VMware has Horizon, Citrix has Zen Desktop and Zen App. Clearly, both VMware and Citrix still believe there's a future in remoting pixels. I can speak to our roadmap. We have a lot of plans for a lot of features we're adding to Horizon. I think Citrix is the same thing with Zen Desktop and Zen App. You know darn well that Citrix and VMware both think there is a future in remoting pixels. So I think that I feel very confident. Like, the amount of smart people here is very large, and the amount of smart people here is not. So I believe empirically that remoting pixels will be a thing. for some time forward. There's the use cases, the classic advantages I mentioned. We might not need it for a better management story, but put your desktop by your data. You can access Windows applications from non-Windows platforms. All those advantages, the classic advantages we got with Citrix, server-based computing in the 1990s. A lot of those still apply in these use cases. So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that Windows applications will continue to be a thing. And I'm saying that remoting pixels will continue to be a thing. So you think that means, oh, well, session over. Is VDI dead? No. VDI is not dead. The end. There's one little final bit, though, I think that we have to look at here, and that is that we have to separate the Windows desktop delivery from the Windows app delivery. And here's where we kind of get into VDI versus these other things like seamless Windows. And in order to look at this, VDI at the end of the day is about delivering Windows desktops to users. So I'm kind of wondering, Windows desktop, Windows app, what's the difference? What's the future look like? We really have to ask ourselves, what is a desktop in order to answer that question? And a desktop is like, okay, there's my desktop. I mean, it's not hard. But what is this really? Like, if you take this desktop, because, for 20 years, 25 years in IT, the desktop is what we built and delivered to users. It was everything. It was, for example, the hardware interface on the device that they were using, right? Like, it's the drivers and what made their computer actually run. It was the application runtime, right? You run an application. It's a Windows application. The desktop is the application runtime and frameworks and DLLs that application needs. Your desktop was a provisioning target. I put Outlook on your desktop. I installed Visio onto your desktop. I installed the software. It's in program files. It's in the registry. It's how I provision things. I provision them to a desktop. The desktop was a security container. The user logs onto the desktop. When they log on, they get their token or their certificate, and then they can access other resources. And everything they click and do within the desktop, it knows who they are, and they have access or don't have access to things within the desktop. The desktop was the user interface. More so than the keyboard, mouse, and monitor, it was the boxes and the check marks and the screen and the cursors and all that kind of stuff. The desktop was an application launcher. However users did it, they clicked the window key. They asked. What is it called? I was going to say Siri. Cortana, thank you. Good product. They asked Cortana to launch it. They shortcut to start. They go to the start menu and click it. They double-click an icon on the wallpaper. The desktop was a way to launch applications. They launched a browser and they launched web pages from there. The desktop is application integration. So not just drag and drop and cut and paste, but different apps. SAP client can use Word as its report generator. They all have common services like printing and location and that kind of stuff. And then finally, the desktop is a configuration container, right? So we configure the desktop. What time zone is it in? What user is this? How are we drawing commas and periods and spacing and numbers and the clock and the fonts and all that kind of stuff. So for 20 years, 25 years, the desktop we thought of as a monolithic block, but really the desktop was like all 8 of these things and maybe another 20 things that we're sort of not mentioning here. But this was the desktop. When we built a desktop, when we configured a desktop, when we delivered a desktop to a user, this is what we were doing. Now, of course, time has moved on, right? Because we don't have just like Windows kind of desktop users anymore. We've got Windows and Mac and Chrome and Android and iOS. This is probably like most of the devices we have. But it's interesting because each of these has its own version of everything, right? Like Windows has all 8 of those things. Mac has all 8 of those things. That the Mac ones are a little bit different than the Windows one, but it still has all 8 of those things, right? The Chrome has all 8 of those things. Android has all 8 of those things. And iOS has all 8 of those things. So all of these devices we had, they had all the same sort of services that was happening. It's just they all did things kind of in their own way. And this is fine. I mean, you launch apps on an iPhone in a different way than you launch apps on Windows. You log into it differently. It's all fine. The problem is, now we start saying, well, hey, we within IT have been delivering a desktop for 20 years. That's how we do everything. That's how we package and configure and target and all that sort of stuff. Well, if I just take the existing desktop that the user has on their device and put my IT desktop that I'm giving via VDI on top of that, I'm basically taking whatever they have and sort of ignoring it and just putting, the Windows version of all the stuff on top of it. And then we can do it on Android and iOS and Mac and Chrome and all these kinds of things. And it's interesting, like this is the reason why it's not fun to use a Windows desktop via VDI or whatever on an iPad. It's and if you want the technical explanation why, it's because the components that make up the iPad and the way its user interface works is we're completely overriding it with our version of the desktop, and so it's just not a good experience. So when we look at VDI, VDI is about delivering a desktop. Well, a desktop is this bundle of these 8 components. And they're sort of all stuck together. And if I'm delivering all 8 of them on top of a device that has its own 8, it's not going to be a good user experience. What we want to do, ideally, is look at those 8 components that make up the desktop. And let's start from scratch and figure out where these components actually sort of live and exist. If I take an iPhone, the iPhone, it has a hardware interface. That's part of what iOS does. It has a user interface. It has an app launcher, and it has sort of app integration. Open in and that kind of stuff. Now, these are all done in very iPhone-y ways, right? The ways that this all works on iOS has nothing to do with the ways that it works on Windows. If I get a Mac, well, the Mac has its hardware interface and its user interface and its app launcher and its app integration, again, which is different from an iPhone and different from everything else. So you can see that the devices we use all have their own sort of components of the desktop. Now, some of these components also aren't tied to specific devices. If I look at the user, some of those 8 things are more user-specific, right? The provisioning target, that's a user thing. I mean, I'm targeting SAP to Brian. I don't really care if Brian is on an iPhone or Windows or Mac. I'm saying, yeah, Brian is in this group, he needs SAP. The same thing for configuration container, for what time zone I'm in and how I like my fonts and my photos and my commas and all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, the security container as well. I am Brian. Brian has rights to do different things. I might use different devices. But so if you see here, if we take the security container, the configuration container, the provisioning target, and try to deliver those individually, onto our devices and not overwrite the device native app integration, app launcher, user interface, device hardware interface, then we can create a better user experience than what a VDI is going to do and just overwrite that thing completely. Now, there's only 7 boxes here. The 8th one is the app runtime. And these are the application runtime, that's kind of dependent on your app. iOS apps run on iOS, Windows apps run on Windows, web apps run on web, et cetera. So what we have is the applications that we use, they are in whatever form of runtime that they happen to be. We can deliver these applications down to specific devices using provisioning target, configuration container, security container, not from the device, but from our EUC system, whatever that is, whether it's VMware or Citrix or Microsoft or Okta or kind of wherever that's coming from. And we can deliver that all sort of independently of the application architecture. Now, all of this stuff is VMware's been talking about this stuff for a long time. I mean, I've been talking about this stuff for a long time. And so this is not new. I think this is important, though, as we tie it back to the sort of original question, which is VDI dead? So to me, I look at it, like I said, we answered the first questions, which is Windows applications are going to be around for a long time. Windows pixel remoting is going to be around for a long time. So really the new questions that we need to ask are, is a Windows desktop needed, or are just Windows apps needed? And then, I guess that other part, as I mentioned, then can any or all of this be delivered in the form of pixel remoting? So to me, I absolutely believe that using the Windows desktop as the configuration container is starting to go away. And we're already seeing this today. You see it today with how things are configured. You're configuring profiles, access to applications, conditional access. These are things that be done in like Identity Manager or Workspace ONE or AirWatch. You're configuring the user environment, the security, the access. You're configuring what they can do in a back-end system, not within Windows itself, where Windows is just another device that the users are accessing. For applications that need to be Windows, if the user is using a Windows device, we can manage it via modern management, and we can choose to deliver an application locally to it. But lots of users are going to use Chromebooks or are going to use Macs, and so for them, Windows remoting is going to be fine. I think we're still going to see we're going to see more and more applications be non-Windows. Like I said, Office is a perfect example of there's native Office applications for every platform now. You look at like SAP and these applications, and there's native versions of those for every platform. So I think those are going to continue to have native experiences on these platforms. But at the end of the day, Windows remoting, pixel remoting, I think is going to be a thing for a long time. I think it's going to be a thing for a really, really long time. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be in the form of a whole Windows desktop with the background and the wallpaper and the start menu and profile. I think it's a seamless Windows kind of thing. Now, we've got Windows 10 multi-user though. Are we going to have published seamless Windows out of multi-user? I don't know. Is that VDI or RDSH? I don't know. So I don't really want to say VDI is dead and RDSH sessions live on, because this could change literally in the next 30 days as Microsoft releases more details on what they're doing. Instead, what I want to say is I think we're going to see delivering a full remote Windows desktop start to just sort of trickle off over years, but delivering single Windows applications, I think that's going to happen for a long, long time. So that's my ideas. We have like 20 minutes left. This is all new material that I created just for this presentation today, and usually I go super long. So, awesome. We have 2 microphones, so if anyone has any questions or comments, come on up. If not, I really encourage you, the EUC keynote, in the program is called like the digital workspace keynote, so you might not be going to that because you're like, what the hell is a digital workspace? But it's the EUC keynote, which comes on, that's like next, pretty much, right? The next hour or so, 4:30. I really encourage you to go to the EUC keynote, see Sean, my boss, see Noah, his boss, and see everything we're going to talk about and announcements for what we're doing in the EUC organization. I actually don't know. I am very low level, very mid-level at VMware. So I'm attending along with you to find out what we talk about. So yeah, thank you so much for coming to this session. And if you have any questions, come on up. Otherwise, enjoy your show.